Giant pumpkin growing is almost a profession in itself. We train the vines to go different ways. We hand pollinate the female flowers so we know the genetics of the pumpkin. We water 4 times a day automatically. We fertilize constantly. There's just so much to it. And we all try to be a pumpkin community. We try to help each other out. Goal in giant pumpkin growing is the heaviest you can get. Our heaviest so far is 1,098 pounds. Puts us in the top 15%, so we're pretty proud of that, but we're still a long way off from the world record of 1725. We got a lot of learning to do and a lot of pushing of the pumpkins, so we'll get there. All of the giants are technically squash. Squash have a soft stem. You can cut it with a butter knife. The pumpkins have a woody stem. So if you pick up a field pumpkin, you can grab it by the handle, lift it up. If you try to do that with a giant pumpkin or with any squash, that stem will break right off. So that's the difference between a pumpkin and squash.
Well, whatever you want to call it, Gus uses these fruits as a canvas to display his artwork.
I've always drawn, I've always doodled and stuff like that. As far as carving or sculpting or anything like that, I'd never done anything like that before. Pumpkin carving actually came about quite by accident. During one of the weigh-offs, we were all sitting around doing nothing and had a big knife to cut open a pumpkin for the seeds, and I said, we should carve one. And after I removed the boot from my mouth, they said, yeah, go ahead, and so thus I got started. When I did start, there were actually some ladies from the Gourd Society had some wood carving tools, and they saw me out there carving. They said, here, why don't you try these? And I'm like, so I tried those, and so that worked out. There are no particular tools that I use for carving that are designed for carving pumpkins, I should say. I've tried using power tools before. They just make a mess. It's actually faster for me to carve with a hand tool than a power tool. I have a whole case full of tools and everything from lay knife to a lemon zester, and I've used all of them at one point or another.
Even having all the right tools, it all comes down to the pumpkin.
The design is somewhat dictated by the pumpkin, somewhat dictated by the client. Generally, I don't have an idea going in. They'll hand me a couple photos or a couple pictures and say, here, carve this. And I'll say, okay. And I lay it out on the pumpkin. I don't use any stencils or anything like that. I will use a litho crayon to mark out my design just to get dimensions. Other than that, I just carve freehand. Technically, what I do is called subtractive sculpture. It's the same as stone cutting or wood carving or anything like that. If you make a mistake, either you take that particular element out of your carving or you carve deeper and you reinvent it. If I'm designing something that I'm doing a lot of 3 dimensions on, I want to carve the stuff that's closer to me first and then carve the background behind it. That way I don't accidentally carve off something that I need later. You don't always know where the center of the pumpkin is, where the cavity is. The best indicator is once the pumpkin starts to get stringy, you know you're getting close. When you're on the edges, it's a very thick, very smooth flesh. Sometimes I'll get into it and I'll be carving and all of a sudden I'll be in the center and not even realize it. Other times, like I said, you get into that more stringy flesh, and that's an indicator that you better stop carving.
Typically, a pumpkin takes about 4 to 5 hours to carve. Some have taken Gus as long as 9.5 hours.
Sometimes I carve something and I'm pretty happy with it and I want to move on to another pumpkin. It really depends on the design, it depends on the fruit, what's available. So a pumpkin is never done. I don't know that I have a favorite to carve. I do enjoy carving the animals at zoos, and so the kids really enjoy those. I enjoy carving flowers. I don't usually carve the same thing twice. I've carved enough now that I'm thinking about starting to carve some things again and improve upon them, hopefully. A hobby gone wild, I guess. I don't know. It is a profession. I do get paid. I am a professional at this. The fun part about carving in crowds is the people's reaction. Some people react and they're just amazed. Other people walk on by like nothing's happening. My best reaction I get is from the kids. It's a good feeling, especially when it comes from a kid.
Kids are not the only ones who enjoy Gus's talent.
I was very fortunate when I got the chance to carve in Las Vegas. A friend of mine lives out there, and I was out visiting her, and she introduced me to the Bellagio Conservatory, and they were in the middle of a changeover. They change it 5 times a year, and she said last year they had pumpkins, giant pumpkins in their fall display, so kind of introduced me to the person in charge, and they wanted me to fly back out and give them a portfolio, and I thought, you know what, this is my chance, so I did, and they gave me the job. I was very, very pleased with that. Went out there, carved, absolutely surreal experience. When I'm in Las Vegas and they're telling me that the problem that I'm causing too much of a crowd in Las Vegas, I take that as a good thing.
Gus's travels would not be complete if not for Ohio's very own Pumpkin Festival.
Being an Ohio carver, anywhere I carve in Ohio, the first question I get asked is, do you carve at the Circleville Pumpkin Show? And I can resoundingly answer yes to that now, and I'm very proud of that. Circleville is, growing up in Ohio, it is my favorite place to carve. It's where I belong. Oh, the people that I've met, the places that I've gone for carving, I never would have done it without. Some absolutely amazing artists that I've met that are other fellow sculptors, and their recommendations towards each other to help each other out, and the community is amazing, as is the giant pumpkin community, the people I've met through that. There's no way to put a price on the camaraderie that I've earned, that I've learned, and I've felt while carving. Unfortunately, this is a decaying medium, and I can either look at it as a piece of art that's gone by the wayside, or I can look at it as a performance that's lasting longer. And that's the way I like to look at it. But they all end up in the compost pile eventually.